December 26, 1476. Candle smoke curls through the frosty air of Milan's Basilica of Santo Stefano, while the Duke Galeazzo Maria Sforza kneels in a puddle of gold brocade. He's humming the Kyrie, surrounded by the glittering power of his court. Suddenly, a man lunges, and a dagger finds the gap between his ribs. Before the priest can even lift the host, 22 more blades follow. The man who thought he was untouchable dies in a red mist on the altar steps, surrounded by the same courtiers who'd knelt to him the night before. How did Galeazzo Maria Sforza, patron of the arts, apex predator, and world-class jerk, end up as a Renaissance shish kebab? Roll the tape back a decade, and you'll see the recipe. Equal parts glamour, cruelty, and really, really bad HR. Hey history nerds, welcome back. I'm the guy who pries open velvet-lined coffins and gives you the smellorama version of the past. Today, we're serving the most operatic assassination you've never heard of. A tale of power, revenge, and spectacularly bad decisions. So grab a coffee, it's going to get stabby. Galeazzo was born on third base and bragged about hitting a triple. His father, Francesco Sforza, was a brilliant mercenary captain, a condottiero, who bribed, blackmailed, and bulldozed his way from soldier for hire to the dukedom of Milan. He married the previous duke's illegitimate daughter, then seized the city when the Visconti line died out, establishing the Sforza dynasty. When Francesco died in 1466, he handed the keys to his 22-year-old heir, Galeazzo. Suddenly, this kid controlled Europe's fattest treasury, shiniest armorers, and a court so blinged out even the Medici felt underdressed. Galeazzo celebrated his newfound power with an almost psychotic level of extravagance. He threw 5-day banquets, hired poets to call him the earthly Jupiter, and transformed the Castello Sforzesco into a palace of jaw-dropping opulence, with courtyards and chapels covered in gold. He was a great patron of music, assembling a choir so famous that composers from all over Europe flocked to Milan. But his tastes were as cruel as they were refined. He let a pet leopard prowl the palace, and rumor had it the cat ate veal while half of Milan ate stones. Complain about taxes. You might get an invitation to the castle. From there, you could disappear into a dungeon playlist nobody wanted to hear. Or worse. It was said Galeazzo took a sadistic pleasure in torture, and once had a poacher executed by forcing him to swallow an entire hair, fur and all. He was a man who collected both artists and enemies with equal passion. Every court has snakes. Galeazzo's had hydras, and 3 heads in particular were growing tired of his venom. Head number 1, Giovanni Andrea Lampugnani. A Milanese noble, Lampugnani's family had a bitter land dispute. Squatters had taken over his estates near Lake Como, and when he appealed to the Duke for justice, Galeazzo laughed and said, "Land's like love, fleeting." To add insult to injury, the Duke had also blocked his family's access to a valuable abbey lease. For a nobleman, land wasn't just money, it was honor. Lampugnani's honor was bleeding out, and he blamed the Duke. Head number 2, Carlo Visconti. A member of the old ruling family of Milan, Visconti had a grudge that was deeply personal. Galeazzo, a notorious womanizer, had seduced Carlo's sister, Lucia. He had promised marriage, a move that would have allied the new Sforza dynasty with the old Visconti bloodline. But once he'd had his way, Galeazzo publicly dishonored her, passing her off to one of his friends like a used Xbox controller. In Renaissance Italy, a woman's virtue was the measure of a family's name. Visconti's family name had been dragged through the mud for the Duke's casual amusement. Head number 3, Gerolamo Olgiati. The youngest of the 3, Olgiati was a 23-year-old humanist scholar and a true believer. His fury wasn't personal, it was ideological. His teacher, Cola Montano, was a fierce Republican who'd been publicly flogged and exiled by the Duke for his teachings. Montano had filled his students' heads with stories of Brutus and Cassius, arguing that tyranny must be met with the sword. Every time Olgiati saw the Duke strut past in his purple silk, a color reserved for emperors, he muttered, "One man shouldn't own a city." Toss in fired generals, ruined bankers, and a long line of husbands whose wives attended suspiciously private palace tours, and you've got a group chat titled Stabby Boys, just waiting for the right moment. They meet in Lampugnani's candle-lit study beneath a fresco of St. Ambrose, the patron saint of Milan, who they pray to for support in their enterprise. Olgiati, the idealist, supplies the wine and the Republican rhetoric. Visconti, the vengeful brother, supplies the daggers, sharp and ready. Lampugnani, the pragmatist, supplies the guest list for St. Stephen's Day Mass, an event Galeazzo, a lover of pomp and music, would never skip. It was the perfect stage. Their plan is steeped in historical cosplay. They decide to wear red and white tunics, the colors of Brutus, because nothing says history major, like dressing up as your favorite assassin while committing murder. They swear a solemn oath on a crucifix to strike the tyrant down. No poison, no arrows from a distance. This had to be personal. Only cold steel, up close, on sacred ground. In their minds, killing the Duke in God's house wasn't sacrilege. It was a holy act. God, they figured, would rubber stamp the paperwork on a righteous kill. The dawn of December 26th is so sharp, even the rats wear mittens. Church bells boom across a frozen Milan. Market stalls stay shuttered for the holiday. Galeazzo is plagued by bad omens. Some say a comet blazed across the sky. Others that he saw his own ghost in his bedchamber. He's urged not to attend the Mass, but his vanity and his love for his magnificent choir win out. He dismisses the warnings, puts on his finest clothes, and swaggers in late, 20 guards in tow. He kneels beneath his family's stained glass window, as if posing for a PR coin. The music swells. Lampugnani, his face a mask of deference, leans in. "Your Grace, may I?" The Duke, likely expecting a petition or some juicy gossip, bends closer. Instead of a whisper, a dagger kisses his thigh, severing the femoral artery on the first date. Blood sprays across the marble like a Jackson Pollock audition. Before the guards can react, Visconti lunges for the chest, and Olgiati goes for the neck. Worshippers scream. A priest clutches the Eucharist to his chest like a defensive linebacker. The guards are a whirlwind of confusion and steel. 23 wounds later, the Duke of Milan slumps against the altar rail and manages to utter, "I am dead," as if reading his own final cue card. Outside the church, the story goes, the pet leopard in the palace sniffs the air and growls at the copper tang of blood drifting from the doors. The conspirators expected the people of Milan to rise up and proclaim a new republic. They were catastrophically wrong. In the chaos, Lampugnani trips on the altar drapery, tangles himself in velvet, and collects 5 guard blades in his spine. The mob, loyal to their dead duke, drags his body into the piazza, hacks off his dagger hand, and hangs what's left from a marble balcony. Visconti and Olgiati sprint through the foggy, labyrinthine alleys, but Milan is a city with 360-degree surveillance powered by gossip. Olgiati is betrayed by his own father, who bars the door and denounces him as a traitor. By dusk, both are in irons. The interrogators bring out the rack, the hot pincers, and the evergreen threat. Talk, or your entire family tree becomes kindling. The confessions spill faster than cheap Chianti. Olgiati, even under torture, remains defiant, proclaiming, "Death is bitter. but glory is eternal. The sentence is a public spectacle, to be flayed alive, starting at the ankles, while citizens sip mulled wine and watch. Their skinless corpses are hung in pieces on the city gates, a gruesome Renaissance billboard reading, "Regicide wrecks your skincare routine." With the Duke dead and the would-be liberators executed, Milan is a powder keg. Galeazzo's widow, Bona of Savoy, a shrewd political operator in her own right, scoops up their 7-year-old son, Gian Galeazzo, like a football and declares herself regent. Picture a boardroom of battle-hardened mercenaries staring at a toddler holding a scepter. It's a recipe for insomnia. Bona leans heavily on her late husband's trusted chancellor, Cicco Simonetta, whose primary diplomatic tool is a pair of handcuffs. He manages to hold the duchy together, but enemies are circling. Venice eyes the eastern border. Florence starts sketching maps, and France sends polite notes asking if Milan needs any advisory services. The real threat, however, comes from within. Enter Galeazzo's charming, ambitious, and utterly ruthless younger brother, Ludovico, nicknamed Il Moro, the Moor, for his dark complexion. After being exiled by Bona, he returns in 1479, overthrows her regency, and has Simonetta executed. Ludovico politely shoves his sister-in-law into a forced retirement, taking full control of Milan. Young Gian Galeazzo keeps the title of Duke. Ludovico keeps all the power. Years later, he'll be the one to hire Leonardo da Vinci to paint a cafeteria ceiling while he juggles wars, wives, and his own spectacular downfall. But that's another episode. The bloodbath at Santo Stefano doesn't just rock Milan. It sends shockwaves across Italy, giving every grumpy baron and rival banker a serious case of stabbing FOMO. Just 2 years later, in Florence, the powerful Pazzi family tries to pull off their own cathedral assassination remix against the Medici. On Easter Sunday, they attack Lorenzo de' Medici and his brother Giuliano during High Mass. They manage to kill Giuliano, but Lorenzo escapes, and the plot fails spectacularly, leading to the conspirators being hanged from the windows of the Palazzo della Signoria. But the script was identical: knives, mass, and a grab for headline news. Historians label the era the Age of Conspiracy, a time when tyrannicide became the ultimate political startup. Decades later, Niccolò Machiavelli, the master analyst of power, would use Galeazzo as Exhibit A in his writings. He pointed to the assassination as a textbook example of how a prince who makes himself hated invites his own destruction, and why rulers should probably install metal detectors at the sacristy door. Like stories where the toxic boss gets a performance review written in steel? Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Who else deserves a place in the Stabbed by Subordinates Hall of Fame? Pharaoh? Shogun? That guy from accounting? Let's compile the list. Here's the kicker. Galeazzo read his classics. He was a learned man who could quote Suetonius on the assassination of Julius Caesar over breakfast. He knew the story of the Ides of March. Still, he partied with angry young men, mistook terror for loyalty, and wore his absolute power like cheap cologne, loud, offensive, and impossible to ignore. He saw the daggers in his history books, but couldn't see the ones being sharpened in his own hallways. Renaissance Italy repaid that particular cocktail of arrogance and cruelty with 23 ventilation holes. The moral? Absolute power photographs well, but it also makes you a very big target, especially when you're wearing gold braid. So the Duke who bankrolled poets, hunted boars with cheetahs, and taxed bread to fund peacock statues bleeds out on sacred stone. His killers, dreaming of immortal fame as liberators of a republic, earned a gruesome footnote and a very public peeling. Milan, the city they hoped to free, simply swapped one tyrant for another, and then another, until foreign armies crashed the Renaissance party for good. Visit the Church of Santo Stefano today, and you'll see tourists snapping selfies, mostly unaware that the marble floor beneath their feet still whispers of blood, ambition, and hubris. If you treat people like animals, don't be surprised when they eventually bite back. Sometimes 23 times. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more power gone sideways stories, and I'll catch you in the next slice of history, hopefully with fewer stab wounds.